Welcome to the Four Seasons Podcast, brought to you by B&H Wealth Strategies, serving Northeast Tennessee and Southwest Virginia since 1966. Here, we guide you through the ever-changing seasons of your financial journey, offering insights to help you grow, protect, and enjoy your wealth. Ready to turn your financial dreams into reality? Dare to dream. And now, here's your host, President of B&H Wealth Strategies, Jeff Bingham.
When the Fed makes a move, your wallet feels it. In this episode, we unpacked how interest rate changes and monetary policy shifts ripple throughout your financial life, from mortgages to market moves. Welcome back, everyone. Skip Monty, co-host / producer, back in the studio with President of B&H Wealth Strategies, Jeff Bingham. Jeff, how's it been going?
It's been going great. Skip, how you been?
I've been just fine, ready for fall, although spring's my favorite season, but I like fall as well, especially up here in the mountains.
Yeah, well, it gets pretty scenic around here come this time of year, and drive through the up on the parkway and watch the leaves turn and get in there with all the other tourists that go
Yeah,
to do that.
I started to say,
right?
it's
No,
beautiful.
it really is. It is beautiful, and like I said, I think we're very blessed to live where we do in this part of the world, because we do get, as you were talking about, your favorite seasons. We get a little bit of all four, but winter's not too brutal, and so it's a nice, sweet spot place to live right here.
Amen, brother. Well, Jeff, it's great to see you again, and I'm ready to dive in. How can lowering interest rates, and this is very timely, lowering interest rates and monetary policy shifts impact the average person?
Well, there's a simple question to throw me back into this thing after coming off a vacation for a week. I appreciate that. No, well, I mean, the first thing that, and we've already seen evidence of this, I think, is that how it affects people's pocketbook. It lowers the borrowing rate. So, mortgage rates, I think, and I can't say exactly where they were right before the Fed cut, but we've trended not only down below 7%, which we stayed above for a long period of time, even touched up in the 8% range on 30-year mortgages. But now we've dropped, I think I saw today, the average 30-year rate right now in the United States is 6.33%. So that alone right there, should provide some, which a pretty anemic housing market now, and anemic may not be the best word to use, but I've used it, so we'll keep it there, to try to revive a little bit of energy, if you will, into that market, because it's extremely important to the United States and the economic growth and just kind of stimulating the economy in general. It also, with the rate drop into 6.33, I think one of the interesting things that we've seen, and this is for the first time since probably before 2022, when rates started going up, you've seen some revival in the refi market, in the refinancing market, because those that bought, at least after the back half of 2022, maybe the latter half of 22, 23, and then 24, and then even, some earlier this year, those rates, as I was talking about, were in that 7.5%, 8%, maybe even some a little above 8%. And now at 6.33, it certainly begs a look to see if a refinance makes sense. And so we're seeing a lot of consumers begin to do that. And so, again, that when you can get mortgage rates lower, you can buy the houses. It gets the housing market to move. For those that are refinancing, whether they're trying to take some equity out or not, that's a different topic. But it does, it reduces their payment. So if you reduce your payment that you're making on your mortgage payment, then you've got more money to spend and or save, into your future, if you will. So that's first and foremost. It will affect the prime rate, and the prime rate is what affects credit card rates. And so I think the prime rate is a blend. It's a blended rate, which includes the federal funds rate, and that's today at 7.25. So it's 3. And the federal funds rates, what the Fed did last week, they lowered the rate to 4.25. That's where the federal fund rate resides today. And like I said, that federal funds rate really doesn't affect anybody probably listening out there directly. It's what we're talking about on the indirect, because that's basically the rate of money that the Fed loans to banks and reserves and all the things that kind of the intricacies of the banking system. But it has, as you I think eloquently put before, the ripple effect down from that we're talking about right here, and thus that prime rate though, prime rate sets, as I said, it sets credit card rates. So we've seen credit card rates begin those, where people that have balances on that begin to come down, and that'll be helpful because a lot of people, when rates were low, people use credit like crazy, and they still do. And when you're paying, when you've got a $10,000 credit card balance and you're carrying that's $2,000 a year. That's $166 a month just of interest payment, if you will, on that, using a 20% easy math for me to kind of calculate out. So if that comes down just a little, you're just kind of freeing up some money to maybe now might be a good idea, as opposed to, paying so much towards interest. You get to pay a little bit more towards, whittling away that principal on there, which again reduces the interest cost. Interest rates are going down. It's just a win-win-win across the board right there. And then I think what else it does is that and I think this is very important for the overall, kind of the, if you will, the macroeconomics of it would be that it's going to stimulate small businesses to be able to go out and borrow at a much lower cost, where so they can add things that they need to their business, whether they need capital improvements in computers or for whatever they need to do. They can kind of build, expand, and grow their business. And oftentimes in small businesses like ours, we use leverage, we use borrowing credit to do that with. And so when that credit cost is lower, as it's going right now, then it will allow small businesses to go out, as I said, to kind of expand and then have less cost, maybe some less cost on what they've already done in the past and currently in the present as well. So it just, it's, I think, in my personal opinion, is that this is a good thing. The Fed lowered a quarter basis point. They're pointing towards probably two more quarter points. Maybe that's kind of the conventional wisdom. That's kind of what we're pointing at. So we cut by 0.75% from that, the one that's already included, and then two more, cutting 0.75, which will get us below 4. It gets us to 375 by the end of the year. We'll see. I mean, the Fed will always say, well, we're data dependent. We'll see what the data indicates right there. But, right before the Federal Reserve meeting last week, the week prior, at the end of the prior week, we saw inflation numbers come in very tame and lower. So we saw good, CPI numbers, consumer price index, and we also saw a number the week before that of what we call the PPI, or the producer price index, what it costs to manufacture and produce goods and services out there, and that number came in well below expectations on a basis. So, it was kind of, the trajectory was already there for the Fed to do it. That obviously set the stage for that. The employment numbers kind of keep getting jiggered around a little bit, but employment is softening a bit. So the Fed mandate is to keep stable prices and to try to get the economy to full employment, to try to find that, really that sweet spot, right there kind of in the pocket.
Not too hot, not too cold. So are there specific strategies that you recommend for, folks like me, average people during low interest environments, if this continues to go in the direction we think it is?
I don't think, not really, because interest rates they're going to go up, they're going to go down, they're going to stay stable, and we're going to gnash and gash and chew on them all the time. But again, has your situation changed? What's really different? You feel better about it because you see the market going up and rallying around an interest rate cut. But those are, that's chasing return, and trying to guess in time and all these things. I mean, if you look, out there as an example, the market went up the day the Fed lowered when the announcement came out on Wednesday. But we've sold off a little bit, in the last few days. So those, so you really don't change. I think what you look at is that, and you don't go out and borrow money, take an equity loan out of your house and go buy stocks because, interest rates are low. There's a lot of that kind of talk that went on, and I'm not going to just completely say nobody should ever do that. That's an individual. That's a one size fits one conversation. But generally speaking, to borrow money to put into the market and invest is a pretty how do I want to phrase that? I want to call it a dumb idea. That's a pretty risky endeavor, right? Those are not the same things. So maybe, it would be maybe fool's gold, something like that. But I think, but again, I think if I'm sitting in front of a client and they bought their house, sometime within the last couple of years, right? And they have a mortgage rate that's at 7.5 or 7.75 or something like that. And I just said, we're at 6 1/3 right now on interest rates. It begs a look at seeing what a refinance would look like. I mean, there's some cost in refinance. There's no question about that. But is that cost and that cost savings of that lower interest rate and that payment differential, how does that impact you individually? So I think those are the things, where you begin to look. And like I said, if you're talking to a small business owner, then you're kind of having the same conversations, but you're also looking at, expand. If we're looking to expand and we're going to have to expand using leverage and those kind of things, then you begin to look at the cost of borrowing now versus what it was. Is this the time to do it? But, you might argue that, well, the Fed's going to cut, at least they're on target, if you will, to lower rates, 2 more times this year. But that doesn't mean they will, right? Because again, it's data dependent. I mean, what could happen between now and the next Fed meeting? Well, lots of stuff could happen, right? There's a little unrest around the globe, to say the least. At the moment, I think just kind of using Ukraine and Russia as an example. I mean, that's a pretty hot spot that we tend to kind of glide through right there. But those kind of things right there can send some shock waves, into the overall economy, and that can change the Fed's trajectory, of lowering rates. So, like I said, I think it's always a one-on-one conversation. What does your situation look like? But you don't really change your investment strategy because the Fed lowered rates. Now, it would tend to boost what investment strategy you have, right? I mean, if interest rates are falling and you've got what conceivably academically will happen in in a lowering interest rate environment, if you're using a portfolio that has the combination of stocks and bonds in it, then your bond portfolio where you own rates at 4 or 5% and rates are now at 3 to 5, you're getting some price appreciation out of the bonds you own plus the yield that you're already getting. So your bonds are rallying up. You're not just clipping the coupon, if you will, and not just receiving the issuance. You're getting what we call total return, which is price appreciation plus the interest that it's paying. So that's the total return. So your bond portfolio could strengthen. And then also the stock market tends to, right? It likes lower interest rates. It likes the lower cost of borrowing. It likes, a looser monetary policy, if you will. And so stocks tend to rise, not always, but tend to rise in a lowering interest rate environment. But again, the reason why you lower interest rates, or one of the reasons, if the Fed funds, to do it, is to stimulate the economy. Well, if we're stimulating the economy, that suggests that we're not as strong economically underneath as we want to be, right? And employment is a little soft, so we're lowering to try to stimulate or keep it moving and percolating going forward. So it's kind of a strange thing to say that we are lowering rates because we're slowing economically, right? To a degree, that's one of the things. But yet the market's going up as rates lower, right? I mean, it's like, oh, we're in trouble, but we're lowering, so the market, goes up. So there's a lot of zig and zag that goes on and kind of moving maybe in a little bit of contradictory or a convention, kind of just where rational thinking might think that markets and how they might move and how bonds might move, in this kind of environment. Because a lot of times people will think, well, it's bad for my fixed income portfolio if rates go down, right? Not in a bond portfolio. If you own bonds that are yielding higher than what the current rate is going to be, it's good for your bond portfolio. Now, if you're going to the bank to open up a savings account or CDs, those rates are lowering. So if that's the kind of savings and investing you're doing, then yeah, that's a different conversation.
Wow. So, in a nutshell, one size doesn't fit all. It depends on your situation and if things have changed.
Yeah, it never does. Like I said, I'm sorry, that was a long-winded answer to what your a short question was. But like I said, I think again, going back to it, because the Fed lowers rates, the Fed increases rates, doesn't mean you change. That's not a change to your plan, right? A change to your plan is have your circumstances changed, right? The economy and the economics of things are going to change all the time. That doesn't mean you don't do anything to your portfolio. That's not what that means either. But you don't really make just wholesale changes because, Fed's lowered rates. Let's take more risk. Let's throw more money at the market. Let's do those kind of things. I mean, I get that kind of sensation because we're used to the Fed lowers. That's going to be good for the stock market. So therefore, I need to pour money into the stock market. Well, the Fed just lowered rates essentially when the market is at an all-time high. I mean, is that when if you've been kind of cautious on things, is that when you want to pour a bunch more money in, right? I mean, that's, what goes up, does come down some. So, just stay true to your plan, have an honest conversation with yourself as an investor and your plan, and then have an honest conversation with someone like me to see, what should we do? Where am I? Where do I want to go? How do I want to get there? And does a Fed lowering rates or a Fed raising rates, does that impact any of those three things right there? And the answer is probably no, it doesn't.
Great advice, Jeff. Thanks so much. Appreciate you. Glad we got you to break this stuff down because it's, for somebody like me, it's super complicated. So thank you for that. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time for more financial clarity and smart planning with B&H Wealth Strategies.
It's my pleasure, Skip. Thanks. And you have a great weekend.
All right. You too. We'll see you soon.
Thanks for tuning into the Four Seasons podcast, brought to you by B&H Wealth Strategies, where your financial success is our priority. Schedule your free 20-minute consultation today by calling 423-247-1152 or by visiting bhretire.com. Take the first step toward making your financial dreams come true. Until next time, remember, every season is the right season to plan for your future. Securities and registered investment advisory services offered through Silver Oak Securities, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. B&H Wealth Strategies and Silver Oak Securities, Inc. are not affiliated.